NASA says that a mystery rocket crashed into the moon and left a double crater, NASA says. Welcome to the new video of Cosmos Observer. The double crater that was left on the moon after a mystery rocket landed into it is an even bigger mystery to astronomers. According to NASA, it wasn't a typical rocket, which was released on the news on June 24th. No one knows where it came from or what it looks like. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter discovered the double crater location. Although the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter was unable to witness the impact, it was hoped that a picture of the spacecraft taken afterward might capture a recently formed crater. With its 7 potent instruments, the orbiter, which was put into orbit on June 18, 2009, has gathered an immense amount of data and made a priceless addition to our understanding of the moon. Over the past 13 years, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has captured several images of the surface of the moon, but there are some regions that it hasn't. In actuality, some of the gaps were close to the predicted crash site. Astronomers were waiting to see what would happen after spotting the rocket last year on a crash course with the moon. It supposedly put on quite a show when it arrived on March 4th, 7:25 a.m. Eastern Time. However, since the object's precise orbit was unknown, there was considerable ambiguity over the precise moment and location of the collision. No matter which rocket it was part of, the object continued on gravity's spiraling track. Nobody on Earth witnessed it as it hit the moon's far side and fell into the 350-mile-wide Hertzsprung crater. According to a NASA report released last year, there are over 100 million pieces of debris and over 100 million objects the size of a marble big enough to cause damage to spacecraft or satellites, and at least 26,000 space junk pieces the size of a softball or larger that could destroy a satellite on impact. The issue was that as they tumble end over end, spaceships and other debris are softly pushed by sunlight in a way that depends on how the items are orientated. It's a minor push, but over the course of 4 weeks, it might move the object a few dozen kilometers in an unspecified direction. It's comparable to predicting the path of an empty trash bag in a windstorm. Because of how far away it is, neither the Apollo mission's landing sites nor those of other space programs are in any danger from the impact. NASA reported there are 2 craters, an eastern crater, 18-meter diameter, about 19.5 yards, superimposed on a western crater, 16-meter diameter, about 17.5 yards. A double crater was really unusual for scientific standards because none of the other rocket impacts created double craters, not even once in the history. The 4 craters created by the intentional impact of the Apollo 14 SIVB upper stage onto the moon had relatively erratic shapes and were somewhat bigger than each of the double craters. According to NASA, at least 47 rocket bodies have created spacecraft impact on the moon, but none created the double crater. NASA claims that the 2 craters may have been formed by 2 big masses on either end of the rocket, but it would be rare because spent rockets typically have a heavy motor at one end and a lighter empty fuel tank at the other end. The dual nature of the crater may reveal its identity because the origin of the rocket body is still unknown, according to a news release from NASA. I must confess that I naively thought it would be easier to find and would have been located shortly after impact. Bill Gray, the astronomer who initially spotted the unusual object and informed NASA of its impending crash, wrote in his blog project Pluto, where he employs software to track near-Earth objects. He mentioned the search for the Apollo 16 booster, which NASA launched in 1972 to explore moonquakes. However, NASA lost communication with the Apollo 16 booster before it could make contact with the moon. For many years, the impact site eluded researchers. Apollo 17 was the final manned lunar mission, and it took place between December 7th and December 19th, 1972. The 12-day mission shattered numerous records, including those for the longest spacewalk, the lengthiest lunar landing, and the largest lunar samples ever returned to Earth. The Apollo 16 crater was discovered roughly 6 years after the other Apollo rocket hits. Gray noted, finding one small crater among hordes of craters isn't all that easy. 3 months of waiting seems like a reasonable amount of time in comparison. Rocket boosters from the Apollo missions left a number of craters some 40 yards wide on the moon, while in 2019, Israel's crashed Beresheet spacecraft scattered debris on the lunar surface, spilling dehydrated tardigrades, aka microscopic water bears, among its crashed cargo. It has happened before that a piece of a spacecraft struck the moon. For instance, fragments of the 1970 Saturn V rockets that carried people to the moon also caught craters. However, none of those collisions produced a twin crater. The crash locations may have finally been discovered by the scientists. The dirt that is thrown out of a gauge crater is often lighter and gradually becomes darker. This is how experts located the craters left by Saturn's fifth stage. However, they would still be searching through the moon's haystack for a single little brilliant spot. According to Mr. Gray, the rocket component was the second stage of a SpaceX Falcon 9 that launched the Deep Space Climate Observatory, or DISCOVER, for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in February 2015, but his theory was junked. The launch trajectory of DISCOVER was incompatible with the orbit of the object that Mr. Gray was tracking, a NASA engineer noted. Further investigation led Mr. Gray to the conclusion that the Long March 3C rocket launch from China on October 23, 2014 was the most likely contender. While Gray believes this may be the first instance of a spacecraft colliding with the moon accidentally, it has happened before. NASA rammed the Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite, LCROSS Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite, into the surface in an effort to find water as late as 2009. A combination of wavelengths from the object's light reflection was analyzed, and according to University of Arizona students, it was determined that a Falcon 9 was not the source of the light. Rather, it was a similar Chinese rocket. However, a Chinese official denied the claim that it came from a Chinese rocket, claiming that the Chang'e's 5T1 spacecraft's launcher rocket stage had already re-entered the atmosphere and burned up. China's evaluation, in Gray's opinion, is incorrect because two different but similarly called lunar missions were jumbled together. Additionally, he contends that more than merely asteroids in lower orbit, some government organization, possibly the US Space Force, should be monitoring space debris in distant space. The Chinese rocket's impact was supposed to occur at night on the far side of the moon, where it couldn't be seen from Earth, so the situation rested there. Researchers say they need more time to understand the mystery to find out whether the rocket was launched by humans or by an extraterrestrial species, assuming that they exist. The mission team was able to fill in the majority of the gaps because the accident might have been foreseen a month in advance. The hunt then began. The comparison is typically performed by a computer program, although it works best if the before and after photos were taken at the same time of day. Since many of the photographs included in the search were shot at different times, the algorithm became confused by the variations in shadows. The project was assisted by senior geological sciences major Alexander SONKE from Arizona State. He calculated that the arduous task had taken him roughly 50 hours to complete over several weeks. The before and after images flickered back and forth, and Mr. SONKE claimed to have noticed a collection of pixels that looked significantly different in brightness. When he first saw it, he was very certain that it was a new geologic feature. The western crater, which is significantly smaller and created a few thousandths of a second before the eastern one, is overlaid on the eastern one, which has a diameter of around 20 yards. Paul HAYNE, a planetary scientist at the University of Colorado Boulder, wrote for The Conversation that the rocket impact will provide a lucky experiment that could reveal a lot about how natural impacts pummeled and scraped planetary surfaces. HAYNE predicts that the rocket was instantaneously destroyed by the impact, producing a white flare that may have been visible from any ship that had a viewing point. The uncertainty surrounding the rocket stage's origin has highlighted the necessity for official authorities to monitor deep space garbage more closely rather than depending on the limited resources of private individuals and academics. No agencies routinely follow space debris so far from Earth. The biggest problem, according to scientists, is space debris in low Earth orbit, where it poses a risk of colliding with operational satellites, producing more trash and endangering human life on crewed spacecraft. Due to the lack of a protective atmosphere, the moon is covered in craters from the frequent impact of asteroids and other debris. NASA has extended the LRO mission to continue exploring and researching the moon. The spacecraft will continue to investigate the moon's surface and geology during the prolonged duration. None of the space-exploring countries have taken responsibility for the rocket or claimed credit for it.